Nigerian army authorities are asking officials of Medicine Sans Frontiers, also known as Doctors Without Borders, to avoid visiting conflict zones in the country, stressing that their security is the government's top priority. The Army Chief of Policy and Plans, Lieutenant General Lamidi Adeosun, pleaded with the MSF representatives at a meeting in Abuja that as they reach out to victims of conflict across the country, they must keep away from serious conflict zones. Lieutenant General Adeosun promised to ensure adequate security for members of the organization to help them alleviate the plight of persons affected by insurgency in the northeast. You're watching the news at 10. Let's flip over to our Abuja studios now, where Linda Agibe is standing by to take us through a couple of more stories. Linda.
Hello, Gimba. The Boko Haram insurgency continues to be a thorn in the flesh of the federal government, with renewed attacks in some parts of the northeast. In this report, our correspondent Olumide Macaulay takes a look at the theater of conflict amidst calls for the governor of Borno State, Babagana Zulum, that more personnel should be recruited into the army to adequately prosecute the war against terror.
Never in the history of Nigeria has the Nigerian military faced a foe as stubborn as Boko Haram. From the civil war to peacekeeping engagements in West Africa, Nigeria's armed forces have acquitted themselves in effective fashion. But now, the might of the Nigerian military is sorely tested, and there appears to be no end in sight.
It is traumatizing. It's quite painful.
2009. During the Goodluck Jonathan presidency, they had their hands full with the start of armed insurgency of Boko Haram, an extremist group which adopted brutal weaponized conflict that left thousands dead, thousands kidnapped, and territory seized. But the Nigerian army engaged the insurgents, recovered territories, and during the current administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, Boko Haram released some of their kidnapped victims. It seemed they were on a retreat, but many attacks later, the dust is yet to settle. Ali Ndome, senator for Borno South Senatorial District, has called for the capacity of the Nigerian military to be increased.
The Nigerian police, the Nigerian army, and other security agencies are overwhelmed. The number is not there. We need to get the number, not to talk about their remuneration. They are not paid. They are not well paid, despite the fact that this government came in and improved on the salary. You are talking about minimum wage now, jacking it up to 30,000. What happened to the Nigerian army side? How much would they be paid? What of the police? What is their welfare? Do you have police barracks now? Do you have army barracks? Even army is better. Look at the uniform of our police. They buy uniforms to themselves. The Nigerian army is the same thing. It's only recently. If you see the Nigerian army in town and the one in the war front, they are different.
Borno State, in the eye of the storm, and the governor Babagana Zulum believes it's time for massive recruitment into the Nigerian army.
I advise the federal government to do mass recruitment of up to 100,000 into the Nigerian army.
The federal government is yet to give its position on the latest calls. But what cannot be contested is, the stronger and more equipped the Nigerian military is, the better it is able to fulfill its responsibilities. Olumide Macaulay, Channels Television News.
Now let's get more insights into the crisis in the northeast, and in particular the plight of displaced persons in that region. And we're being joined on the news at 10 by the Secretary General of the Nigeria Red Cross, Mr. Kinde Abubakar. Mr. Abubakar, you're welcome to the news at 10.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to have.
So the military has asked, humanitarian organizations to stay off the area where an insurgency is hitting hardest. Yeah. Now, as a member of the humanitarian organization, the Red Cross, how tense or dangerous is it to operate in that area?
Well, as you may be aware, Nigerian Society was enacted by Act of Parliament in 1960, and which gives us mandate actually to serve as humanitarian organization across Nigeria. So we have been responding to this crisis since independence, and there is a record of what we have done, particularly during the Civil War in the late 60s. Mr. President and the Commander of Nigeria acknowledged leverage the services that were undertaken by Nigerian Society volunteers during that spillover. So, I mean, serving in a very precarious situation is not very new to the National Society. Our volunteers and staff are trained in such a way that they, as much as possible, give safety precautions to ensure their safety and also those people that they assist.
Now, there have been talks about, the magnitude of the devastation and humanitarian need in the northeast region, particularly where the insurgency, is holding sway. Can you tell us just how many people are still displaced or in need of help?
Well, there has been actually a lot of data coming from that region from various organizations. But what I want to say clearly from the Nigerian Society, as early as 2016, there was a record of about 7.5 million people that were displaced. But with the kind of commitment from government and other organizations in supporting this, the number has actually gone down. Most of the internally displaced persons camps across northeast, particularly in the Adamawa, Bauchi, Gombe, Yobe, and northeastern states actually have since been kind of officially closed. What remains mostly now is what is happening in Borno State. As the National Society, we are managing about 25 internally displaced camps, and also people who are in Borno State, yes, and also the people in in the host communities, with a total population of about 1.5 million currently. Within 5 local government areas.
Now, what are the efforts that have been put in place to ensure that safety is guaranteed, especially in the regions where you operate?
Well, the Nigerian government actually is working very hard to ensure safety of not only humanitarian agencies, but also the general population in Northeast. People are putting a lot of effort. If you compare with what happened in other countries such as Afghanistan and Pakistan that even have a nuclear arsenal, compared to Nigeria. So I will really say that our military is really working hard, and their efforts are highly commendable. In ensuring that we have safety. Some rules have already been kind of undertaken to ensure safety of people, humanitarian agencies, and of course the people in the area. And I will say that we are collaborating. We have never had any discontents in the course of our operations in this northeastern part of Nigeria.
Now, so what would be your suggestion, to the authorities, to government, and even the military, considering the scale of the humanitarian crisis in the northeast, to meet the targets of, restoring people to their homes permanently? Yeah,
the situation in the north is actually something that I would say we have not had a record of. Since independence, so it is purely actually very much a terrible situation, very pathetic on how this situation has become a kind of prolonged and protracted. So we are actually encouraging, particularly non-governmental agencies that are working in this area to also support the cause of government. Clearly some of the incidents that are happening are actually not within the limit of weaponry. So we really want to employ the general population and of course those countries that support Nigeria and indeed the other philanthropy organization to also look at the areas they can really support to add to what government is doing in order to protect and prevent the scourge of this situation. It is very important to note that this situation is not something that one will say will actually end very immediately. We have seen, like I mentioned, other countries. So people also, individual groups and communities need to also learn how to really contend with this situation. Some of the key advices, especially security advice being given by government agencies and the partners should also be really adhered by people. I want to say clearly, Nigerian society is working closely with its partners, moving partners, the International Committee of the Red Cross and the National Red Cross and Society is actually in alleviating the suffering of those that have been affected by this situation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kendi Abubakar from the Red Cross for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, while the army cautions charity group Doctors Without Borders to avoid working in conflict areas, the president, on the other hand, acknowledges the sacrifices of the group in those areas in Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari told the president of the international organization, Dr. Christos Christou, that he appreciates the efforts of the group, noting that the organization's sacrifices as individuals and as a group were quite enormous. The president's statement reads in parts, "We are grateful to you who will secure the environment in order for you to do your job. You are not doing it for profit. We remain very appreciative." He also promises that respite and succor would come to all the troubled areas, particularly in the northeast, with many prominent and well-to-do organizations along with international agencies involved.